The four horsemen of the apocalypse are perhaps one of the most famous and feared images in the book of Revelation. Their presence alone signals that the world is entering into a period of unimaginable chaos and destruction. But what do these four riders represent, and why are they so terrifying? The first rider, who rides a white horse, is often interpreted as a symbol of conquest or deception. He carries a bow, and a crown is given to him, meaning that he will go out to conquer, seemingly victorious in battle. Some scholars believe this rider represents the Antichrist, a figure of false peace who will rise to power deceptively. Others think he might be a symbol of general conquest, the onset of war or tyranny. What makes this rider particularly chilling is that he represents the beginning of a long chain of suffering. His conquest is only the start. What follows him is far worse. Next comes the second rider, seated on a red horse. This horseman represents war. His arrival marks the end of peace and the beginning of conflict and bloodshed. The color red symbolizes the blood that will be shed, and his presence means that people will start killing one another. Nation will rise against nation, and conflict will engulf the earth. Imagine the chaos of war on a global scale, with no part of the world left untouched by violence. In a time of global upheaval, this rider brings not just destruction, but a profound sense of hopelessness as human life becomes expendable in the face of endless wars. Following him is the third rider, who appears on a black horse, representing famine and economic collapse. In his hand, he carries scales, symbolizing the measurement and rationing of food. Revelation describes how a day's wages will only be enough to buy a small amount of grain, and luxuries like oil and wine will be nearly impossible to come by. This is a terrifying prospect. The world, already ravaged by war, now faces famine. People will be starving, and many will perish not from direct violence, but from the slow, painful death that comes from hunger. The suffering brought by famine is not instantaneous. It drags on, grinding people down as they struggle to find enough food to survive. Finally, the last of the four riders appears on a pale horse. His name is Death, and Hades follows him. This rider, the embodiment of death, is given power over a quarter of the Earth's population. His method of destruction is varied. He brings death through war, famine, plague, and wild beasts. The inclusion of Hades following him suggests that this rider is not just concerned with the physical death of the body, but also with the eternal consequences that follow death. The combined terror of this final rider is unmatched. He does not discriminate in how he brings death, and his reach extends over a quarter of the world's population. These four horsemen together represent a catastrophic breakdown of society. Conquest leads to war, war leads to famine, and famine ultimately leads to widespread death. In many ways, the four horsemen serve as a vivid warning about the fragility of human civilization. The terror they bring is not just in their violence, but in the sheer inevitability of it all. Once the seals are opened, their arrival cannot be stopped. The prophecy of the four horsemen speaks to a time when humanity is forced to confront the consequences of its own rebellion against God and the utter hopelessness that results from turning away from Him. If the four horsemen of the apocalypse weren't terrifying enough, the next prophecy reveals even more chaos, this time in the form of cosmic disturbances. When the sixth seal is opened, it brings with it a great earthquake, but that's just the beginning. Imagine the sky darkening in the middle of the day. The sun, once a symbol of life and warmth, is now black as sackcloth. The thick darkness is suffocating, eerie, and unnatural. People look up and see that the sun no longer gives light. Instead, it's as if the sun itself is dead, covered in darkness as a sign of impending doom. At the same time, the moon, which has always been a symbol of tranquility and nighttime calm, turns blood red. Picture looking up at the sky and seeing the moon glowing an ominous shade of red, casting everything in a surreal, eerie light. The red moon, often associated with blood, suggests not only natural disaster, but also great violence to come. These are no ordinary cosmic events. These are signs from heaven that the end is near. The stars too begin to fall from the sky, as if the heavens themselves are crumbling. The heavens are rolled up like a scroll, and the natural order of the world is collapsing. This prophecy isn't just about physical destruction, It signifies the shaking of both the earth and the heavens. The very things people have depended on for comfort and stability, the sun, moon, and stars, are no longer reliable. There is nowhere to hide from this kind of destruction. Revelation describes people of every rank, from kings to slaves, hiding in caves, crying out for the rocks to fall on them. They would rather be crushed under mountains than face the wrath of God. This prophecy underscores how powerless humanity is in the face of God's judgment. All the wealth, power, and influence that once seemed so important now mean nothing. Kings who once commanded armies and nations now cower in fear alongside the poorest of the poor. In the face of God's wrath, everyone is equal, and no one can escape his judgment. The question posed in Revelation, "Who shall be able to stand?" is a haunting reminder that when God unleashes his judgment, no one can endure it unless they are on his side. As if the destruction caused by the seals wasn't enough, the next set of judgments comes with the sounding of the 7 trumpets. Each blast of the trumpet brings even more devastation, and the scope of destruction becomes greater with each one. These trumpet blasts aren't just random acts of chaos, they are carefully measured judgments, each one targeting a different part of the earth. The first trumpet brings hail and fire mixed with blood, and it is thrown down to the earth. A third of the earth is burned up, including a third of the trees and all the green grass. The image here is one of overwhelming fire consuming everything in its path. Forests, fields, and all vegetation are wiped out, leaving behind a scorched and barren landscape. Imagine the smell of burning wood and grass, the sight of ash falling from the sky, and the despair of knowing that there's no more food or shelter to be found in the natural world. The second trumpet brings something like a huge mountain, blazing with fire, that is thrown into the sea. As this burning mountain crashes into the waters, a third of the sea turns into blood. This is reminiscent of the plagues of Egypt, where the Nile was turned into blood, but on a much larger global scale. All the creatures living in that third of the sea die, and a third of the ships are destroyed. Picture the oceans turning red, filled with dead fish and marine life, and ships sinking into the abyss. The sea, once a source of life and sustenance, becomes a symbol of death and decay. Next, the third trumpet sounds, and a great star named Wormwood falls from the sky, burning like a torch. It falls on a third of the rivers and springs of water, and many people die from the poisoned waters. Wormwood is known for its bitterness, and the star symbolizes the corruption and pollution of the earth's fresh water. Water, the most essential element for life, becomes toxic. People drink it and die from its bitterness. In a world already ravaged by fire, blood, and destruction, even the water becomes deadly. The fourth trumpet brings darkness, as a third of the sun, moon, and stars are struck, causing a third of the day to be without light. The world is plunged into partial darkness, and people are left to stumble through the shadows. This darkness is more than just physical. It represents spiritual blindness as well. The absence of light symbolizes the absence of hope, and people are left in a state of confusion and despair. But the worst is yet to come. The fifth trumpet introduces the first of 3 woes. A star falls from heaven, and the abyss is opened. From the abyss rises a swarm of locusts, but these aren't ordinary locusts. These are demonic creatures with the power to torment people for 5 months. They don't kill their victims. They simply cause unbearable pain. People will seek death but won't be able to find it. The description of these locusts is horrifying. They have the faces of humans, the teeth of lions, and tails like scorpions. Their sting is so painful that people will beg for death, but death will not come. The sixth trumpet brings a massive army of 200 million soldiers, led by 4 angels bound at the Euphrates River. These angels are released to kill a third of humanity with plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur. The scale of destruction is unimaginable. A third of the Earth's population is wiped out in a single moment, and the world is left in ruins. Even after all this devastation, people still refuse to repent. Their hearts are hardened, and they continue in their rebellion against God. The seventh and final trumpet signals the end. It announces the coming of God's kingdom and the final judgment. With this trumpet, the mystery of God is complete, and the time has come for the dead to be judged. It's a moment of both terror and triumph, as the righteous are rewarded and the wicked are punished. Perhaps one of the most bizarre and terrifying images in the book of Revelation is that of the demonic locusts that are released from the abyss when the fifth trumpet is sounded. These creatures are unlike anything found in nature. Their appearance is grotesque and unnatural, a twisted parody of life. They have the bodies of locusts, but they also have human faces, the hair of women, the teeth of lions, and tails like scorpions. These locusts are not sent to destroy crops or livestock like the locusts of Egypt. They are sent to torment people. What makes these creatures even more terrifying is that they don't have the power to kill. Their sting is so painful that people will wish for death, but death will evade them. The torment they inflict lasts for 5 agonizing months. During this time, people will try to escape the pain, but there will be no relief. It's a period of unimaginable suffering, a foretaste of the judgment to come. The image of the abyss being opened and these creatures being released speaks to the idea of hell being unleashed on earth. The abyss is often associated with the realm of demons, and the fact that these creatures come from there suggests that they are agents of Satan sent to inflict as much suffering as possible. Their torment is not just physical, but spiritual as well. They are a reminder that in the end times, the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds will be blurred, and the forces of darkness will be given free rein to torment humanity. What makes this prophecy so terrifying is the sense of hopelessness that accompanies it. There is no escape from the torment, no refuge from the pain. People will try to hide, but the locusts will find them. They will try to die, but death will elude them. It's a picture of ultimate despair, where even death, which is often seen as a release from suffering, becomes unattainable. The sixth trumpet introduces a prophecy of war unlike anything the world has ever seen. 4 angels who have been bound at the Euphrates River are released to lead an army of 200 million soldiers. This is not a normal army. It's a supernatural force, equipped with plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur. The destruction they bring is catastrophic, wiping out a third of humanity. The sheer size of this army is overwhelming. An army of 200 million is almost incomprehensible, especially in ancient times. The idea that such a force could be unleashed upon the earth is terrifying in itself. But what makes this prophecy even more chilling is the method of destruction. The soldiers aren't armed with swords or spears. They are armed with plagues. The fire, smoke, and sulfur that issue from their mouths bring death and destruction on a scale that has never been seen before. The imagery here is apocalyptic in every sense of the word. The world is being consumed by fire and smoke, and people are dying by the millions. There's no escape from the destruction, no place to hide from the advancing army. This is total, unrelenting war, and the casualties are enormous. What's particularly terrifying about this prophecy is that it seems to represent a world that has completely descended into chaos. There are no more rules, no more boundaries. The forces of destruction are unleashed, and there is nothing that can stop them. The fact that a third of humanity is killed in a single event underscores the scale of this destruction. It's not just a war between nations, it's a war against humanity itself. One of the most well-known and feared prophecies in the book of Revelation is the prophecy of the mark of the beast. This mark, which is placed on the right hand or forehead, is required for anyone who wants to buy or sell. It's a symbol of allegiance to the beast, the Antichrist, and those who take the mark are aligning themselves with Satan. What makes this prophecy so terrifying is the choice that it presents. People must choose between taking the mark and being able to participate in society, or refusing the mark and facing persecution and death. In a world where the economy has collapsed, food is scarce, and survival is uncertain, the pressure to take the mark will be immense. But taking the mark comes with a heavy price. Those who take the mark are aligning themselves with the forces of evil, and they will face eternal punishment. Revelation makes it clear that the consequences of taking the mark are eternal. Those who take the mark will not be able to escape the wrath of God. They will be cast into the lake of fire, where they will be tormented forever. This is not just a physical mark, it's a spiritual decision. It's a choice to reject God and embrace the Antichrist. The idea that people will be forced to make this choice is chilling. In a world where survival is uncertain, the temptation to take the mark will be overwhelming, but those who take it will be sealing their fate for eternity. It's a choice with eternal consequences, and it's one that will define the final days of humanity. If the trumpet judgments were terrifying, the bowl judgments are even worse. These final judgments are poured out as part of God's ultimate plan to cleanse the world of sin and rebellion. They are the final act of judgment before the return of Christ, and they bring devastation on a global scale. The first bowl brings painful sores upon those who have taken the mark of the beast. These sores are not just physical afflictions. They are a visible sign of God's judgment on those who have chosen to follow the beast. The pain is unbearable and there is no cure. People are left to suffer in agony with no relief in sight. The second and third bowls turn the sea and the rivers into blood. Every living thing in the water dies, and the world is left without a source of fresh water. The oceans and rivers, once teeming with life, become symbols of death and decay. The smell of rotting fish fills the air, and people are left to face the consequences of their rebellion against God. The fourth bowl causes the sun to scorch people with intense heat. The sun, which has always been a source of life and warmth, becomes a source of pain and suffering. People are burned by its rays and there is no escape from the heat. It's as if the very creation is turning against humanity, reflecting the broken relationship between God and his people. The fifth bowl plunges the beast kingdom into darkness. This darkness is not just physical, it's a spiritual darkness as well. People gnaw their tongues in agony, but still they refuse to repent. Their hearts are hardened and they continue in their rebellion against God. The darkness is a symbol of the spiritual blindness that has consumed the world as people refuse to turn back to God. The sixth bowl dries up the Euphrates River, preparing the way for the kings of the east and setting the stage for the final battle. The armies of the world are gathering for war, and the world is on the brink of destruction. This is the moment that all of history has been building toward, the final confrontation between good and evil. The seventh and final bowl brings the greatest earthquake the world has ever seen. Cities are leveled, mountains are flattened, and islands disappear. Massive hailstones fall from the sky, crushing everything in their path. The destruction is complete, and with it comes the final declaration of God's judgment. It is done. Babylon in the book of Revelation represents the world's corrupt system of idolatry, immorality, and rebellion against God. Its fall is a symbol of the end of everything that stands in opposition to God. Revelation describes Babylon as a great city, a center of commerce, wealth, and power. But it's also a city of sin, a place where people have turned away from God and embraced the ways of the world. The fall of Babylon is swift and sudden. In a single hour, the city is destroyed. The merchants and kings of the earth mourn its destruction, not because they love the city, but because they profited from its corruption. They weep and wail, knowing that their wealth and power have been lost forever. The destruction of Babylon is a reminder that the things of this world are temporary. Wealth, power, and influence mean nothing in the face of God's judgment. The fall of Babylon is the final nail in the coffin for the world's corrupt system. It's a declaration that God's kingdom is coming, and everything that stands against it will be destroyed. The Battle of Armageddon is the final battle between the forces of good and of evil. It's the moment when the armies of the world Gethe to wage war against Christ. The beast and the kings of the earth assemble their armies in a last-ditch effort to defeat God's kingdom. But their efforts are in vain. Jesus, depicted as a warrior on a white horse, leads the armies of heaven into battle. With a word, he defeats the forces of evil. The beast and the false prophet are captured and thrown into the lake of fire, and their armies are slaughtered. The Battle of Armageddon is a reminder that no matter how powerful the forces of evil may seem, they are no match for God. The victory belongs to Christ, and his kingdom will be established forever. The final and most terrifying prophecy in the book of Revelation is the Great White Throne Judgment. This is the moment when all the dead, small and great, stand before God to be judged. Books are opened, and each person is judged according to their deeds. Those whose names are not found written in the book of life are cast into the lake of fire, a place of eternal torment. This is the final judgment, the end of all things. It's a moment of both terror and triumph as the righteous are rewarded and the wicked are punished. The final judgment is a reminder that in the end, everyone will have to stand before God and give an account of their lives. There is no escape from this moment, no way to avoid the consequences of one's actions. It's a sobering reminder that our choices in this life have eternal consequences. The book of Revelation offers a terrifying glimpse into the end times. Its prophecies are filled with images of destruction, suffering, and judgment. But they also offer hope for those who remain faithful to God. In the end, evil will be defeated and God's kingdom will be established forever. The terrifying events of Revelation are a reminder of the seriousness of sin and the importance of remaining faithful to God, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. These prophecies are not just warnings, they are also promises. They promise that God will have the final word and that in the end, His kingdom will come and His will shall be done on earth as it is in heaven. While the prophecies of Revelation may be terrifying, they are also a source of hope for those who trust in God. The ultimate victory belongs to Him, and those who remain faithful will share in that victory for all eternity.